Chapter 1: The House That Stayed Standing. People always thought my dad was older than he really was. His name was Dave, and he was in his 50s. But life had already given him enough stories to fill several lifetimes. He was the kind of man who woke up early every morning, even when he didn't need to, because he had spent his whole life believing there was always something that needed doing. In the evenings, he would sit on the sofa watching television and eventually fall asleep, although he always insisted he was only resting his eyes. Nobody believed him, but nobody argued either because that was just Dad. My name was Jeremiah, and I lived with my dad, my brother Dean, and my two sisters, Olivia and Bella. Dean and I were both 18, Olivia was 17, and Bella was 16. We were close enough in age that the house was never quiet. There were arguments, jokes, teasing, and all the normal chaos that came with a family of 5 living under one roof. Our house was old. Not the kind of old that people spend a fortune trying to recreate, but the kind of old where you could see the years. The roof had a couple of weak spots, and Dad had repaired what he could, but sometimes temporary fixes became permanent because there was always something more important to pay for. The old garden shed was slowly falling apart, leaning slightly to one side and looking like it could collapse at any moment. The lounge door had fallen off its hinges years ago, and nobody even remembered exactly when it happened. There was a hole underneath the stairs that Dad always promised he would fix. Soon, he would say. With Dad, soon could mean tomorrow or years from now. The basement was the oldest part of the house. The light no longer worked, it was freezing all year round, and everyone knew which steps to avoid because they creaked more than the others. It wasn't a place people enjoyed going, but it held our memories. Old tools, old photos, and things Dad refused to throw away because he always believed they might be useful one day. The house had problems, but it was still home. Money was tight. Only 2 people in the house brought in money. I worked weekends, and Dean worked too, while Olivia and Bella were still in school. We didn't have expensive things or a perfect home, but we had each other. Dean was probably the person most like Dad. He was serious, hard-working, protective, and always wanted to help. He loved cars, golf, and saving electricity. If someone left a light on, everyone knew about it. "Who left this on?" he would shout. Olivia was different. She cared about the same things, but she handled them calmly. If someone did something wrong, she didn't get angry. She explained what happened, showed them how to do it better, and praised them when they got it right. Bella was the youngest, and at home she was kind, helpful, and caring. Outside the house, she was a normal teenager. She liked spending time with friends, cared about her appearance, and sometimes tested the rules. She wasn't trying to cause trouble. She was just growing up and trying to find herself. Then there was me. I liked cars, sports, and exploring. I enjoyed making people laugh, but I also knew when it was time to stop joking and get something done. Dad always told me that being funny was good, but knowing when to be serious mattered more. Ash Chapter 2: The Man Before Dad. Before Dave became our dad, he was just a young man trying to build a life. He learned early that nothing was handed to him. As a teenager, he started working, and his first proper job was in construction. It was hard work, the kind that tested people every day. When he was in his 20s, he spent long days outside in the heat, pushing wheelbarrows full of cement up and down hills. It was exhausting, but Dave never complained. He believed that if something needed doing, you did it. Those years shaped him. They made him strong, but they also left marks that stayed with him. The aches and tiredness from years of physical work never completely disappeared. Eventually, Dave met Margaret. They fell in love, got married, and later decided to start a family. They became parents later in life, but Dave was ready. Having children gave him another reason to work hard. First came Jeremiah and Dean, then Olivia, then Bella. 4 children who depended on him. For years, Dave worked, provided, and tried to give his family everything he could. Then life tested him. Dave had always been the type of person who ignored problems. If something hurt, he carried on. If something was wrong, he convinced himself it would pass. Luckily, one of his friends noticed something wasn't right and encouraged him to get checked. The cancer was caught quickly, but it was still frightening. For someone who had always believed he could handle anything, Suddenly, there was something he couldn't fix by simply working harder. There were appointments, difficult days, and uncertainty, but Dave fought through it. He survived. Years later, he rarely talked about it. If someone asked him how he got through it, he would probably just shrug. I did what I had to do. That was Dad. He never saw himself as a hero, but to us, he always was. Chapter 3. The Family We Became. As we grew older, we learned that families do not always look the way people expect. For a while, we had both parents. We had Mum, Margaret, and Dad. But things changed. Mum struggled with alcohol, and over time her choices affected the family. Eventually, Mum and Dad divorced, and her life went in a direction that took her further away from us. Her actions eventually led to her being sentenced to life in prison. We were no longer close with her. It was complicated. There were questions, feelings, and things we didn't always know how to explain. But the person who stayed was Dad. He was the one making meals, helping with school, working long days, and still asking how our day had been. He never tried to make us hate Mum. He never filled our heads with anger. He simply focused on being there. As we grew up, we each became our own person. Dean became even more like Dad, always working hard and wanting to protect everyone. Olivia became the calm one who helped people learn from mistakes. Bella became more independent, wanting to prove she wasn't just the little kid anymore. I started noticing things more. I noticed when Dad was tired. I noticed when stairs became harder for him. I noticed that the man who had always seemed impossible to break was still just a person. But despite everything, we were still a family. The house was still old. The roof still needed work. The shed still leaned. The basement was still cold. But those things mattered less because the people inside were what made it a home. Chapter 4. Still standing Dad was still Dad. He still woke up early. He still told the same stories from when he was younger. He still fell asleep on the sofa and claimed he was only resting his eyes. We still laughed at him for it. Life was not perfect. We still had problems. We still worried about money. We still annoyed each other. But we were together. And eventually we realized something important. For years, Dave had carried the weight of the family by himself. Now his children were old enough to carry some of it with him. Not because he was weak, not because he had failed, but because he had spent his entire life making sure we were strong enough to stand beside him. The house had cracks in the walls. The repairs were never ending. The roof leaked and the doors didn't always work properly. But after everything we had been through, one thing remained true. We were still standing. And we were standing because of him.